Stan Rosenthal is a creator of paintings and prints, a man whose energy and curiosity have propelled him through a rich tapestry of experience and happenstance. He was born into a Jewish family in 1930s London and was drawn to art and creativity from a very young age. After attending art college as a teenager, Stan found early success with a selection of his paintings exhibited at the Ben-Uri Gallery in London, alongside work by Marc Chagall and Jacob Epstein. An eye injury in his late teens changed the path of his life away from his art and through various fields of work, including mental health nursing and lecturing in psychology, philosophy and management. He developed a passion for martial arts and Zen philosophy before a chance encounter with a friend reignited his love of painting. His creativity blossomed once again, and Stan Rosenthal re-established himself as a professional artist after a break of nearly 40 years. Following in the footsteps of his heroes, Graham Sutherland and John Piper, Stan has celebrated the Welsh county of Pembrokeshire on canvas. He has achieved a considerable degree of success and notoriety through the sales of thousands of prints to collectors across the world, whilst also supporting local causes, running workshops for schools, and raising money for various charities. In 2008, he moved to East Sussex with his family, where he opened a new studio gallery. He has continued to paint with boundless energy, whilst developing his interest in brain science and questions of consciousness. His 2007 book, How Art Happens, is a testimony to his passion for neuroscience and his relentless desire to understand how art is created from his physical being. This film shows a series of interviews with Stan Rosenthal and explores some of Stan's ideas about this powerful yet elusive phenomenon called art and how it happens. During the Second World War, Stan was evacuated from London. After an anxious train journey, he arrived at the home of a baker from whom he still vividly recalls his introduction to visual art.
He got a pencil and an exercise book. He opened the exercise book, and on the inside of the back page he drew a map of England and a picture of an elephant. And he did this to take my mind off the situation I'd been in. But all I could see was this pencil and the elephant and the map of England appearing out of the end of the pencil as though it was magic. I think I thought at that time that it must be magic, or could it be magic, or was there something else? And that whatever it might be, I'd like to find out what it was that caused it to happen. And that's when I decided I wanted to be a drawer. I didn't know the word artist, but that was the beginning of when I wanted to know how art happens.
Some people may be born with a flair for creativity, but Stan believes that early emotional experiences can trigger an interest in art, which is reinforced by participation in creative activity. Psychomotor skills are clearly important and improve through practice. The child develops a sense of the aesthetic through exposure to art and can do so intuitively without being aware that it is occurring. Over the years, Stan has enjoyed helping many children to explore their mark making and express their imaginations.
Little children enjoy mark making, and a lot of adults enjoy mark making. And when we're on the telephone and we're just doodling, we're mark making. Nice. Yeah. Now, sometimes mark making develops into something else. Yeah. If we attach it to creativity, then we've started off the process of art.
So when do the marks made on the paper become a piece of art?
I discuss in one of my books art and non-art. Yeah, and there is non-art, which means it doesn't include creativity, but it's well drawn, and it can be a beautiful picture. Yeah, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be, but it just isn't art. But we would look at it and we wouldn't bother to distinguish it. Yeah, but an artist probably would.
Stan believes that one of the factors that determine whether a picture is a work of art is how well its elements form a harmonious whole. He proposes that the experience of visual art is a gestalt phenomenon and similar to hearing a musical chord. Both perceptions, the visual and the auditory, happen in the instant and in their totality. People can be described as having a good ear for music, but for well-developed visual gestalt ability, Stan uses the word visuacy.
It's a word I invented because we have literacy, yeah, and we have numeracy, yeah, and I hadn't heard of visuacy, so I looked up all the dictionaries I could find, yeah, and I couldn't find visuacy, so I thought, well, that really describes the visual equivalent to these other things, so I thought it would be a good word to use, so I started using it. And then, of course, I found it in various dictionaries after that it had been used, but not widely. Oh. It's the ability to think in a visual way, yeah, and to understand visual impressions, visual mental images, in the same way as some people understand poetry and others don't understand poetry, or some people can look at a poem and get a deeper meaning to it than other people. And visuacy is the same thing, but thinking in terms of visual mental images.
Do you see arts then as if you like fundamentally a language, a communicative tool?
Yeah, it's even more than that. Yeah, it's what I call paralanguage, but paralanguage is the expression that goes with language. So you can't say a word or a phrase without there being paralanguage. It can be spoken high, low, soft, fast, slow, in lots of different ways, yeah, and that's what I call the paralanguage, and paralanguage is essential to art.
It is through paralanguage that art finds its voice, helping it to sing out to many or to whisper a more subtle message. The words in the language of visual art are line, shape and colour, but nuance and intonation can be added using techniques that manipulate space, colour quality and illumination, amongst many others. Even the materials themselves can be brought to the fore to modify meaning and shape emotion. We each have our own unique set of reference frames for the world around us, and it is through these that we perceive meaning in our experience of reality. They are generated from our personal memories, emotional experiences, and thoughts about events as we move through life. These frames of reference inform our visual system, highlighting what is significant and what to look out for in the external world. This form of convergent attention is indispensable for everyday functioning, but more open and divergent attention allow the mind to be receptive to new visual experiences.
What would you say are the most important steps to creating art?
Awareness, yeah, attentiveness, open-mindedness, mushin.
Mushin is a Japanese word meaning without mind. It is shortened from a Zen expression which refers to the state of no-mindedness.
We need to be aware, and we need total awareness without it being pointed at something. We're not looking for something, we are just looking. The red flash was sort of partly inspired by a statement by Graham Sutherland, who was another one of my heroes, and also by the image which occurred on that particular day, which was that as I'd just finished a day's sketching, not very successful day's work. As I was coming home, I happened to turn and my mind was empty of anything else, and all of a sudden it appeared that everything turned red. And in fact, that's this climatic condition which occurs in some places occasionally. So I painted that from memory of the redness, which is a bit like when you're a youngster and you put a torch in your mouth and it glows red through your cheeks, and everything glowed red like that, and that was the red flash. But the importance of it in terms of art is that one has to approach with a completely open mind. I wasn't looking for anything, it's just when that suddenly occurred, I was aware enough to see it and keep my focus on it. If I go for a walk in the country, I see 1,000 things. Then gradually certain things seem to dominate others according to my inner needs at the time. But one must train the mind to avoid preconceived ideas, to allow it to remain open and receptive to all manner of things. Sometimes a memory of something will lie in my mind for several years before I feel the need to represent it.
A wonderful example of this in Stan's work is his painting of Gronga Hill. As a teenager, he fell in love with the work of John Piper, having seen his illustrations in a book of poetry. Stan was particularly captivated by Piper's lithograph of Gronga Hill and was determined that one day he would draw this mysterious place himself, despite having no idea where it was. Half a century later, when living in Pembrokeshire, Stan set off for Carmarthen to find Gronga Hill and made sketches from the same viewpoint as his hero, Piper, before him.
So I'm interested. I mean, you have, and you've drawn on recently this idea of a neuroscience framework to understanding artistic creation, but there are other frameworks, some of which are quite old, including religious ideas about what drives art, other concepts about how art happens, and even the idea that art can never be explained scientifically. We're talking about different things. So I was just wondering what other kind of frameworks and influences.
They don't work for me. I think that was part of my pleasure in being introduced to neuroscience. I can't connect the religious thing with art. I do think of myself as religious, but sort of more in a Zen way, and I tend to think of sort of the spiritual as being part of me, or I'm part of it, but I don't think of it in terms of art. I think it's there, and if there's a God, let God look after it.
Stan holds that emotion plays a crucial role in the generation and appreciation of art. In his book, he states that it is important for art to communicate to the viewer the emotion experienced by the artist at the moment of inspiration. He relates this emotional intensity to Abraham Maslow's notion of peak experiences, those moments when we become deeply involved, excited by and absorbed in the world. Stan recalls a time when this happened to him.
It was Salvador Dali's Crucifixion with the fishing boats at the bottom of the picture, and it was looking down on Christ suspended on the cross. But I sat and looked at that picture when it was in the Haywood. I was there for about 2 hours looking at this picture, and one of the attendants came up and said, "Are you okay?" I was just totally absorbed in that picture. Nothing else existed other than that picture, right? And that's a sort of peak experience. Now, I'm not Christian, so it wasn't that message that was doing it for me. I don't know what it was, but it did something.
Emotion can also be a driving force in the creation of art. Ideas attached to strong feelings intensify in the mind and eventually reach a level where it becomes too much for the artist to handle comfortably. This leads to a strong need to externalise the ideas, which is part of the process of creating art.
Do you think the notion of inspiration is the same across all artists, in that everyone experiences bursts of inspiration with it in particular contexts, and there may be times when inspiration doesn't come the way of an artist?
Again, I think it's one of these things, you can't make it happen, but what you can do is prepare better.
If we are sufficiently prepared, inspiration is the trigger for the creative process. For this to result in a work of art, a period of quietening the mind is often required. the conversion of a percept to a visual mental image, or VMI, worthy of externalisation as a piece of art, is what Stan refers to as incubation. This process has to be allowed to happen without conscious interference.
There's an old Zen saying, an aphorism, which goes that the best way of clearing muddy water is by leaving it alone. And I think this is what incubation is. It's emptying the mind of superfluous thought, or of any thought, to allow things to happen rather than making them happen.
That state of being doing Tai Chi, doing meditation and that kind of thing, is that do you think in the background you're processing creative ideas, or are you excluding those ideas from the mind?
No, you're just doing something with absorption. Yeah.
Right.
So you're absorbed in what you're doing, let's say with Tai Chi. And when you get good enough at Tai Chi, you don't have to think of which movement comes next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they just flow from one to the other. One movement leads into the next movement. Yeah, and you don't need to think which comes next. Yeah, but then there are instances when you're doing Tai Chi and all of a sudden something breaks in, yeah? Or when you're meditating and something breaks in, and all of a sudden there's an idea, which seems to have come from nowhere, that's not related to the meditation, but that the meditation has actually triggered something.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't have been a peak experience, but it could have triggered something. Yeah.
To what extent do you think artistic creativity is an expression of the dreaming process, if you like, the kind of...
Yeah, I think it is. If it's not dreaming, it's something very much akin to it. Yeah.
Do you dream differently when you're in a process of creating a work? Do you find that
Yeah, I don't stop thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Even when I go to bed, I don't stop thinking about it. Yeah.
Stan considers that an important part of the creative process happens during sleep, particularly after long periods of concentrated thought on a piece of work. He likens neurons to performers in a highly complex orchestra working through the night to make the necessary adjustments for the following day's performance.
While it's incubating, what's happening is the percept, which is the sort of physical visualization of what I'm actually seeing, changes to a visual mental image, which is not quite the same. So in other words, if I'm looking and I get a percept of a group of buildings, there might be something wrong that doesn't quite fit. Yeah.
Okay.
So developing a VMI, the visual mental image, occurs, right, allowing the quintessential aesthetic to take over from the percept, so it becomes a visual mental image, which is a more refined idea of the picture.
Stan uses the term quintessential aesthetic to refer to the distilled essence of an image that has the power to move the viewer towards a strong emotional reaction. It is subjective, as it depends on the individual frames of reference, but also intersubjective, where there is greater similarity in the experiences, perceptions, and personal meanings of different people. The quintessential aesthetic is the very heart of an image, and yet the image does not need to look like the original percept for it to shine through.
I might see a particular percept, a particular thing. I look out to sea, or I'm on the beach and I see some cliffs and some rocks in the sea, and I might try a drawing of those, yeah. And I might look at it and say, that doesn't really capture whatever it is that I'm trying to capture. Okay. Now you might ask me now, then what is it you're actually trying to capture? And the answer is I don't know. When I see it, I will know it, but not before then. So I will keep doing it, and I will try it maybe as a vertical picture or as a horizontal picture. Might try it in different colours until eventually I've got something that I say to myself, now that seems to ring a bell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes, I think I'll go along with that. So I'll try it again, and I'll try it another way until I think, well, I've got rid of this, I've got rid of that, I'm left with this, and this is the quintessential aesthetic. Now I've got to get rid of something else so that it will highlight what is left. Yeah.
Strengthening of the quintessential aesthetic would not be achieved without the process of distillation.
Distillation is actually the removal of some elements, but the highlighting of those which remain. It's not just removing, it's not just simplifying. Yeah, it's highlighting as well of the remaining elements, which bring to the surface the quintessential aesthetic. I've recently started painting using the separation of line and colour, so the line floats on the colour. Okay. And Piper did that a lot, yeah, and he got that idea from Raoul Dufy, yeah. Okay. And I've recently started painting in that way, not all that many years ago, but I've always been a fan of Piper's, so why all of a sudden it should occur now, I don't know. But Piper's thing was line and colour, right. And he would offset one against the other, and he would paint a block of colour, and he would draw a figure inside in line, in white line perhaps. Yeah.
Verification is a step before it becomes finalised as a work of art.
The verification is the actual drawing and painting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And potentially there's an early verification and a later verification.
Yeah, that's right, and it keeps going. You keep having these phases or stages of verification, yeah, until you've got a picture at the end of it which has verified the visual mental image.
So people during acts of creation speak in various ways about being immersed in the creation of a work, of detaching themselves from time and well, I don't know if we do it deliberately, but we become detached from time and space. Can you put it into words in your own experience in that way? Because it's something that we can read about as non-artists.
Yeah, it's because I might have no idea how long I've been doing it. I might start drawing at 8 o'clock in the morning and still be drawing and painting at 10 o'clock at night. And then I will say to Nikki, what's for dinner? And she'll say, you had dinner at 12 o'clock or whatever it is. But I just can't remember because it was a time I stopped for a few minutes, but my head was still painting, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Do you think that sense of detachment, do you call it flow, or is that something different?
No, I think flow is a development of that. Yeah, it's when all of the things come together. So we no longer have to think about what we're doing. It just happens. There are times when you get this feeling of flow and everything is going right and it's all coming together well.
Flow occurs when there is effortless attention on a task. This immersed state of mind has been associated with ego boundary loss, time distortion, reduced heart rate and blood pressure, improved performance, and often a deep sense of joy.
If you talk about Maslow, he had this idea that people are driven in a hierarchy of ways that go back for, to fundamentals of meeting their nutritional requirements at a low level.
Right,
and
that's it. But you can.
But artists can die for their.
You can skip levels.
Right.
You can skip levels. Yeah, and just get on with the painting, because Maslow would say, well, you're working, you're painting, you get hungry and you stop and you eat. Yeah. But not all artists do. They can be starving hungry, but the drive to do that picture or to complete a part of a picture is stronger than the need to eat.
Again, the idea of the artist and the artist's self getting dissolved in the process of creating it's interesting because again, in some traditions, people talk about external influences. So it's not just a loss of self in
Right.
creating the work, but the idea that actually it's not you that's controlling your hand, it's a muse or an angel or
that's never
been part of your experience.
no, nor my sort of not rational nor irrational thought. It's just
When it seems to be, at least in literature and descriptions of some artists, a metaphor for this idea of getting, say, the work taking over their lives and
yeah, well, perhaps they need the metaphor.
Okay.
But I'm just happy for it to happen.
Stan attempts to bridge the scientific and artistic approaches to creativity in visual art. His ideas correspond in many ways to the theories of psychologists and brain researchers and validate them in the real world of the artist's studio. However, creativity is not the sole preserve of the professional artist. Stan believes that the development of visuacy and creative ways of looking at the world can start from the beginning of life, with each person discovering their own aesthetic sensibility. This could be beneficial beyond the sphere of visual art.
What's your definition of creativity within the context of art?
Something new, which has aesthetic value, in visual art, Now, it doesn't have to have aesthetic value in science, although it does seem that a lot of things in science do have aesthetic value because of the way scientists describe it. They say, oh, this is a beautiful concept, or whatever, Or exquisite, I think I've read, An exquisite theory,
People like elegant experiments.
Elegant experiment, I like that expression. I think it's quite true. I think these things are fit that description.